Hello and welcome to the North Fork podcast. I'm Eric, and today I'm here with Lonnie Cribb from Superior Ammunition over in South Carolina, who is joining us over Teams to talk a bit about hand loading, ballistics, bullets, and things like that. So, first of all, thank you very much for coming on, Lonnie. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Eric, and I appreciate you having me on your podcast.
We uh, we tried doing this when we met over at Dallas Safari Club, but they wouldn't let us. So we tried to record it after hours, and actually the people there running Dallas Safari Club they were very eager for us to leave, so they sort of interrupted us in the middle of our last attempt at recording this.
Yes, they take that pretty serious over there, getting everyone out. Yeah.
Indeed. So now we're back at it, and yeah, let's get right into the questions. So, your company, Superior Ammunition, provides professionally loaded ammunition for virtually all calibers using a variety of components. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into professional hand loading?
Yes. So basically, I've been kind of, you know, shooting and an enthusiast, hunter for my childhood and things of that nature. I ended up graduating high school and going into the military, and at that point, kind of started to look around and take things a bit more serious and try to improve on my performance levels and different types of ammo and things. And so as I moved to Alaska, I picked up a 300 Win Mag, and at the time I was using federal premium from some of the local shops and things, um, and boy, it started getting awfully expensive to try and keep up with that pace and um, on a military budget. And so I just started to, pull out some of the small equipment that I had and started to add on to it. And next thing you know, it was everything that I could read, anyone that I could talk to about reloading and things of that nature. I tried to do it as often as I could, and started getting into it. And as I started to get a little better at it, when your friends find out that that's something that you do, boy, you get friends that come out of the woodwork. And so
Yeah.
ever a shortage of things to hand load and to help out with, and rifles to zero and work up loads for and things of that nature. And so that's kind of how it went about. And I'd gotten kind of through my military career, and I knew I was looking at retirement. And at that point, hey, Eric, did I lose you?
Yeah, I lost your video for just a second, but not the audio.
Another call come in for some reason. It come through, but anyhow, kind of got into what am I going to do after I retire? I'd kind of been working the F-22 Raptor program at Elmendorf there, and was looking at a few options. And at that point, was approached by some friends that knew about my hand loading and things of that nature, and they said, "Hey, this is really right up your alley." And so um, we wasn't all that interested, honestly, right out of the gate. But we had my intentions were to stay right there in Alaska and continue living there in Alaska. And we had a couple of family events that ended up bringing us back to the lower 48, kind of back to back. And the wife and I kind of started talking about maybe, since we have been gone for so long, that we get a little closer to home, so that things like this aren't so um, hard to deal with, from a distance. So we talked about it, and we decided that the business at the time was in South Dakota, and my wife felt very strongly that if we were going to leave Alaska, she wasn't stopping at South Dakota. I'd spent quite a bit of time in South Dakota, and I really enjoyed South Dakota. I still like going back and things. And so there was a lot here in the local area. My background being aviation and things of that nature, Boeing was hiring 3,800 new employees at the time, and they were growing. The whole area was growing, and it was kind of right in the middle, South Carolina being kind of in the middle of where our family was from Virginia to Florida. And so it kind of worked out well that we ended up back here.
Okay, so you don't have like a family connection to South Carolina. It sort of ended up being close enough to both families, right?
I grew up in South Carolina,
Oh,
originally about 2 hours from where I'm at now.
okay,
And yeah,
cool.
uh, but
And
that was,
yeah,
when you're an ammo type, you're always kind of looking for um, states that are favorable to
mm,
guns and ammunition. And so, yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that we do have to deal with that, in today's age. And so South Carolina was pretty favorable. And so I didn't, you never really know exactly how favorable they are, or businesses for that matter, until you know you they just sometimes don't want the bad PR and things of that nature of loaning money and different things um, to certain businesses.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think South Dakota is quite favorable to gun rights as well, right? That's certainly my impression.
South Dakota was an awesome state to do business of any sort, and it was just absolutely amazing. I went down and I applied for my business license, and I received a phone call. Of, I had to drive to Pierre to file my business license, and on my way home back to work, I basically received a phone call with an individual telling me she was going to be my representative. She was going to be right there in town with me. Here's my direct line. If you have any questions, collect your statements until October. She gave me a date. She's like, on October, come and see me with these. Um, when I can promise you, it wasn't that way when I got to South Carolina. They really did. Uh, South Carolina's gotten a lot better
Mm,
since I've been here.
mm.
Um, Approximately 11 years now. But South Dakota was just a standout state to do business in.
Amazing, yeah. I'll have to visit South Dakota sometime. I certainly want to do that. But going back to what you were saying about hand loading and especially rifle zeroing is something I can relate to. Because at some point, word starts getting out that you are the guy who sort of know your way around rifles, and then people start approaching you to help them zero their rifles, and this is something that keeps happening to me as well. Um, um, so basically, that's how it started, right? For you, you were interested in hand loading, obviously, because you wanted to better your performance. And this is, I agree with this statement 100%. This is the main reason I do hand loading as well, and I think every serious dedicated hunter should do hand loading or look into hand loading, because if you get a box of factory ammunition, it will shoot as it shoots, right? Your rifle might like it might not like it, right? And there's really nothing you can do about it, right? If it shoots zero point 0.5 MOA, awesome. But if it shoots 2 MOA or 175 MOA, it's never going to shoot better, right? So to better to increase your performance, right? You have to do something else, right? And so yeah, it makes perfect sense to do hand loading. So then what happened? You were in hand loading for friends, right? You were working with rifles more and more, and then when did you decide to start a proper business?
Well, I was approached by some friends in South Dakota. I was down on a waterfowl, pheasant, and deer hunt. We would pull archery tags out there in South Dakota, And while I was out there, I was approached. We were kind of talking about I had gone out there every year to hunt with them, and I had missed the year prior because as I was kind of moving into position to retire, I was trying to bank some days so that there would be less of an impact. So when I had that leave, I'm still collecting a check from the Air Force at that time, the military, and I knew that there was most likely going to be a span of time there that as I was looking for a job or trying to get positioned or security clearances or whatever it may have been to fit that job, that there was going to be some time delay there. And so the more time I could bank, the better off I would be, the better position I'd be in. And so I did not make the South Dakota trip the prior year. And as I'd gotten there, my friends from South Dakota basically said um, that they had something that they wanted me to look at, um, and kind of offered me a proposition to manage the business that I currently own. Um, they had kind of looked at, introduced me to it, and at that point, I was able to put some things together, make some decisions, sell my home in Alaska, move my family to South Carolina, go back and work in South Dakota during the interim while we were procuring the business. And so I had worked out with my predecessor that he'd stay on for a little bit to make certain that if there were questions or concerns that we felt um, confident that, you know, I didn't want an abrupt stop on. Um, I'll be honest with you. When I first heard about, owning an ammunition business, I had nothing. I did not want to do any. I had no desire to have a part of it. You know,
That's
until
a
I really started.
interesting first reaction.
Yeah, and it was a truthful reaction. And I even told my friends, and they asked me to take a look at it. They said, "Lonnie, really take a few minutes, look at this. Yeah, it really would, pay dividends to look at it." And as I started looking at it, and the more I studied it, and the more I got familiar with it, I was like, really, I didn't realize that there was even such thing as custom ammunition and things of that nature. I didn't realize that somebody had started a business on that. I've been shooting factory ammo and hand loads my whole life, and I really liked the model that the business was based off of. And I've tried diligently to keep the model of that business the same way it was when I bought it, because I really liked the way it fit into the community. I think a lot of people really wanted to get out there and compete against Hornaday and Winchester and the big manufacturers and things. And I never intend to have this business do that. Nothing against factory ammo. Um, I just don't think that I compete against them. I never intend to, but I also feel strongly that they don't compete against me. And there's plenty of you know um, things out there. There's plenty of customers out there that want factory ammo, and they're satisfied with that. And I was one of those people for a while until I couldn't afford it. I tell you, Federal put together some loads for me that shot outstanding, and but it was to the point that I was shooting a volume that I couldn't consistently, you know, um, wrap my head around the money that I was spending and that. But little do I know how much I ended up spending becoming a hand loader, and I'm glad my wife didn't know. What I was spending on that at the time, because it sneaked on you for sure.
I can relate to this 100%. One of the arguments for getting into hand loading is that you're going to save money, right? Look, factory ammo is expensive. If you do it yourself, you're going to save money, obviously. But in my experience, and I think in almost every hand loader's experience, the opposite is true. Because once you get into hand loading, right, you're not going to do just one load and then load a cheap bullet by the thousands. You're going to try different powders, you're going to try different bullets, you're going to try different primers, you're going to try different cases, you're going to, and eventually, yeah, you end up spending way more.
That's right. Yes. And, you know, you gain a lot of knowledge and things of that nature, and it doesn't ever seem to get boring. There's always something else to try, and I don't know. It's been a lot of fun for sure, and like I said, it was just one of those things that I constantly would sit while the family's watching TV, and I'd have a spear manual in front of me that I'm just reading from, while they're watching TV, and then when I was done with that, I'd grab another manual. I'm just reading it, um, and just kind of going from there, and just things start to come together on, oh, that's what they're talking about. When you don't have anybody, or you didn't work in that business from the ground up. I had a few people that I had spent some time with and things of that nature that had hand loaded. But looking at it now, looking back on what level we were doing that back in those times, it was pretty crude.
How so? You say crude. What do you mean? How was it different back then compared to today?
Well, it was one of those things that, you never really paid much. Well, at that point, when I'm saying it was crude, that we weren't looking at neck tensions, early on, as how much of a factor that could be, and playing with the seating depths. We started out just kind of, loading up some rounds and kind of picking some different powders and things and seeing how they were going to shoot. And when I kind of got together, a buddy of mine, he bought a scale and I bought a press, and we were sharing some of the burden at that point of some of the things. So
that's nice, because it is a large initial investment when you have to buy all the equipment. So yeah, it's nice if you can do that together with somebody else. But I wanted to ask you, Lonnie, why might like a regular hunter or even a hand loader, why might he benefit from going to a company like yours?
Well, I think we're kind of dancing around the thing earlier with every rifle. Just the manufacturers, when they're doing volume, and I think they do a really good job at it. I don't want to take anything away from what they're doing. They're doing a heck of a job. When you have so many rifle manufacturers, whether it's custom, whether it's if you take a rifle such as a Remington and a Browning, the dynamics of that action, free bore, chamber reamer, they're so far apart, even though they're semi-spec. At that point, it's what, and even if you had 2 Brownings, or just say 5 Brownings, for instance, and this load may shoot in 3 or 4 of those Brownings and shoot lights out, but you put it in 1 or 2 of the others, and not it's just not what you're looking for at that point. So if either you got to do 1 or 2 things, and it's a much more affordable to source other ammo that will shoot into that rifle, or source more rifles to shoot to that ammo. So those are really your choice, or either you just got to sit back and accept what you have. And so with that being said, I think that's where it's a real standout, that we can kind of tailor to someone's needs more than a factory, because a factory is kind of bringing together a rack and stack of what they want to see in a load, whether it's a match load, whether it's a hunting load, whether it's a type of bullet, A caliber for 300 Win Mag would have a different application than say a 45-70 in a lot of situations and things. And so as you're kind of tailoring to that customer and finding out what he does, what type of shooter is he? Is he a behind the shoulder shooter like we were raised to as young hunters to shoot behind the shoulder, or is this individual, does he like to bury the bullet right in the front shoulder and kind of break an animal down and things of that nature? Um, if I can get that information from a customer, I can tailor what my suggestions are going to be for that customer to improve his outcome. Is this shooter, does he shoot more long shots? Someone here in South Carolina, there's very few times throughout a year that someone can take long shots in South Carolina. Uh, we've kind of heard the Beanfield rifles and things of that nature, but I don't know. They're not shooting in bean fields in South Carolina during the season when the ag's there, because you wouldn't see the animal. It's more or less, okay, you're getting some shots on this critter after the ag's been pulled out of the field and that sort of thing. Most of your shots are going to be fairly close. There are some power lines and things like that that get maintained. But yeah, it's one of those things that I try to share with customers a lot. We go and set up to shoot long range. And we may go and put a target up and we're on radios and things and with which hedge clippers and weed eaters and like, hey, cut this back and break that down, pull that back, hang a flag here so that we can shoot those distances. And you just don't have that opportunity when you're out in the field to have a crew out there on the radio that you can do that. So I think that's one of the biggest things, is being able to tailor to what a customer's doing and what his needs are. Everybody's aren't the same. And we can knowing bullet construction and different things, we can share some of that information. We can put a few options out there in front of that customer in our sample pack programs and things of that nature to let the rifle kind of choose, something that's going to work well for their application. And we know we wouldn't really suggest anything that is not kind of geared towards their application. And so once the rifle picks that load, then at that point, if they're picking a particular bullet that they want to shoot, I can, change up powder charges and things. And I see that a lot. I've gotten rifles in here, multiples, 3, 5 rifles that you couldn't tell apart. They all the same paint scheme, all the same caliber, made back to back at a manufacturer. That this one wants to shoot 42.5 grains, this one wants to shoot 43.1, and you're kind of tailoring, and they will shoot those loads respectfully, but they may shoot 42.5 outstanding, and then it may shoot 40.1 outstanding. And there'll be some times if you're shooting some high volume that maybe you need to go back and retune for that load. A lot of people will think that, boy, my barrel has been shot out. I need to, have my rifle rebarreled. And in essence, we can either do one or two things. Hey, why don't we either plus up the powder charge or change your seating depth a little bit and see if we can't pull that back in. And often that will really surprise you at how well, getting close to the edge of that window will open your groups up, and you can kind of bring that back by sharing with the customer, really kind of think about that throat maintenance and maybe retuning that load to your rifle a little bit more after you've shot, several hundred rounds through it.
Yeah, because the barrel will wear, each shot will wear a little bit on the barrel, and yeah, and eventually you're gonna reach a point, right, where the load you tuned in initially is gonna be just slightly off, and then yeah, you can do a new load, right, to bring it back in. And yeah, I think that's a very good thing for shooter. I guess this is more for target shooters. But for shooters to keep in mind that a barrel might not be shot out, at a certain point, but rather what you need to do is to tune in a new load. So that's actually a very good thing to keep in mind.
Yes, and what I see a lot in where I'm at is a lot of these customers are spending money on a good quality rifle. It's kind of it's running two roles now. They want a rifle that they can take out with their buddies and on an afternoon or weekend and shoot some long range targets and have a good time, but still be in the corner waiting for that phone call that, hey, why don't we run out here and do this hunt or something like that. So it's kind of doing a dual role system. You know, they can play around on the long range side, and they can also, and we can tailor to that. When we're talking and make those suggestions.
That's amazing. So exactly, you could tune in a match load for, let's say, long range, or for pure target shooting, and then you could also tune in a hunting load that's going to perform equally well, but for a different task in the same rifle, right?
Like your new CX that's coming out. One of the things that a customer may come along and say that he's got a rifle. There you go. That he wants to take out and he wants to shoot 600 yards. Those bullets are very capable of shooting very respectfully at those distances.
I have something. I'm glad you brought this up. I have something I want to show you. This is from when I was doing some zeroing on my rifle with the new CPX 165 grain. So that's the sort of group I was getting in my hunting rifle out of the CPX.
Yes, and so it's not probably going to win any bench rest competitions, but that's very respectful groups right there. If you can get those consistently, that is very, very respectful. And so the numbers are among the averages and of the people. And that's what most people are doing. A lot of the people that we load for aren't shooting bench rest competitions and things of that nature. They want a load that they have confidence in, that they can take it out to the range, zero it, hunt with it, have great results, have great performance, which is key. And when I say performance, on game performance, and then, still show up and not feel like they're taking the back seat when they show up at the range to shoot steel targets at 500 and 600 yards with that same load.
That would be ideal, right? I would love to have that. You have a very good competent hunting bullet that you can trust up to, let's say, hunting ranges for me is going to be at the most 300 yards, right? So I know that I'll be able to get my game at 300 yards. But then, maybe I want to go shoot at 500-600 yards, right? And if I could take the same rifle, the same load, and go and do that, that would be amazing.
And the thing about it also, too, is, we're talking 500 and 600 yards. 500 and 600 yards is a chip shot for some people, but the masses don't even have access to a range far. So they are, that's the long end for them. And so, and those are some of the decisions that we're looking at on what their application is. There's only a few times out of the year that some of these guys can shoot, and that's when, the ag is out of the fields and there's open ground out there that they can shoot across, because if there's ag or, and things of that nature around, it really does cut back on what a lot of people have access to.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were mentioning earlier, you're not going to be out there with a weed whacker when hunting. You're not going to have many deer left in your woods if you're trying to clear a shooting path with a weed whacker.
Yeah.
But I wanted to, we touched upon this briefly. I wanted to ask you about bullet selection, because you were mentioning something very interesting to me. You said back in the day we were all taught to shoot behind the shoulder, right? Slightly behind the shoulder. And I guess the idea behind that is that you want the bullet to, because back in those days most people would be using a softer a sort of traditional cup and core type bullet, right? And you would want that to sort of slip in, not hit any major bones, and then it would fragment, and that's how you're going to get your game. But these days, obviously we have other bullet constructions, and if you're hitting them right on the shoulder, you certainly have bullets available to do that these days. And I mean the North Fork SS bullet, I think, is a phenomenal example of this, which is a bullet that will expand to look like this virtually every time, and it doesn't matter if you hit a thick bone or not. It's still gonna get in there. But you were so what are your thoughts on bullet selection, and what hunters primarily should be thinking about when looking at bullets?
Well, for one, they need to shoot a bullet that will shoot well in their rifle. And once they find a bullet that will shoot well in their rifle, we need to have a conversation on what the best uses are for that bullet. Like you had mentioned earlier, if it ends up being that rifle really shoots a cup and core, or if it shoots a monolithic bullet, or it shoots an SS, the cup and core bullet is going to be significantly different than your SS or a monolithic, such as your CXs and different manufacturers. And so I don't know that a lot of people even know what the inside of that bullet looks like. And that's okay. That's what we're here to help them with. There you go. So, and even seeing that, they may not even realize the bonding process, the additional effort that goes in to make that bullet stay together repeatedly and consistently, to where when you take that shot, and if you were to arrive at that animal, you've taken a 200-yard shot on this animal, and you arrived at that animal, you should have an image in your head, or I do, of what my results are going to be, because I kind of feel like, from a mental snapshot, okay, that was a good shot. It went off right when when I was holding right where I wanted it, and so I had this angle or that or the other, and so I'm already putting together an image of what I anticipate to see when I get there. And a bullet that is consistent is super important to me. And when I say consistent, is that it performs similarly each and every time, whether it did get hold of a bullet or if it was just shot through some dense tissue and that sort of thing. So when I arrive on that animal, I don't want to really see any surprises. Did that bullet overexpand? Did that bullet, fail to expand? Did that bullet, did it exit? Or, I already know on the size game and things of that nature that most of the time I'm right before I even get there and see what the results are. Just because this animal is slightly quartered away, it's a 250-pound pig, and I did feel like that the angle that I had is probably encountered bone, and I've kind of already had an idea of what to expect when I get there, and that's what you're looking for. In the conditions itself, saying that conditions like South Dakota, where when the ag is out of the field, you can see for 3 miles in every direction, is a little different than here in South Carolina. And we talked to the customer, and we're kind of looking at, what conditions are they going to be hunting. If you need something that's going to put them down right then, here's the best bullet to use, and this is the best method on using it to improve your odds of getting that result that you're looking for. If you shoot an animal in South Dakota and it runs 40 yards, you never lost sight of it. You've seen every movement that animal made. In South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, the terrain is so dense that if an animal could literally turn and make one leap, and you may not see that animal again, and it's covered 40 yards, and there's a lot that could have gone in a lot of different directions in that small amount of time, even though only it's a second and a half or 2 seconds. And when you don't have that that image to follow, or have the visibility to know. The mind has the ability to start playing games on you, where you're like, well, was it a good shot? I didn't really see how the animal reacted because I was shooting a little bit heavier recoiling magnum or something of that nature, and it was just a split second that I had, and I missed it. I missed that opportunity to see that. So now you start to second guess: did I shoot something? Did I hit a limb? Did I, did I make a bad shot? Did my sling swivel impact the front of the box blind? I mean, there's just so many things that just start running through your head, and you have to get a handle on that. And um, and you just have to go look for it, and you're hoping that it's a quick recovery, because in this thick, dense cover that we have here is full of briars and limbs and snakes and spiders and things that you'd prefer not to be out there entangled with, and you'd rather be back at the skinning shed.
Yeah.
So
So this is exactly what we're taught as hunters in Sweden. It's very important that you keep everything in your mind as is. So once you shoot at an animal, right? Once you let that shot go, usually you're not allowed to immediately follow it. Like, you have to stay where you're at, and you have to remember everything that happened, right? Where was it exactly? Where did it turn to? Where did it go? All of these. Because what we do over here is we usually have somebody with a dog, right? We have a dog team, which, so if you shoot at an animal and it disappears, usually what will happen is, as a hunter, you'll stay in your place and you'll radio it in, and then somebody with a dog will come and they will follow it up, right? So usually you don't do that on your own. But it's very important then that you can relay exactly what was happening. And, as you were saying, not to second guess yourself, but just start to remember all the facts and then relay them clearly to the people who are going to help you recover the animal.
Yes. Yes, I often, I have two added values that I have a dog that generally goes with me everywhere. He's not trained to trail or anything like that, but he does pretty good at it. And one of the things that has been pretty eye-opening to me is how much we've shot on video, whether we're using at night, if we're shooting depredation for deer and pigs, that we're shooting at a thermal optic, and you've got in your mind what actually happened, and then when you go back and you watch the video, you talk to. I was using a lot of equipment before that you would have to go back to some type of laptop or a computer to download. So a friend that may have been standing right beside you may have his interpretation of what exactly happened, and you have yours. And then when you get back and you're watching this actually on video unfold,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a couple of sides to that story that,
Yeah.
And we see more of it now that we have the ability to video more of it, and follow up and see exactly what happened and what you captured in your mind.
Yeah. So
Really,
the video doesn't lie. That's the problem, and the benefit.
yeah.
So yeah, as you were saying, bullet selection is vital, right? And that's one of the things you look at with your customers, because depending on what they're hunting and where they're hunting and what ranges they're hunting at and what rifle they have, and all of these factors are going to impact exactly what bullet and what load you're going to be using, right? And that sounds like a phenomenal service to be providing, because I don't think too many hunters spend a lot of time philosophizing, about these sort of things, right? They certainly, a lot of the hunters I know around here, most people are happy to buy, whatever's on the shelf and seems, to be a good deal, and that's what you hunt with. But that's certainly not the optimal setup, right? And it seems to me that people or hunters who put more thought into these things, and maybe even get some professional advice and guidance as you're providing, they're gonna, in the long run, have more situations where they do better.
Correct. And that's what we're looking to do, is improve the results that the customer has. first you want to build off of their confidence that what they're shooting, that they're confident in. I think there's a lot of validity in being confident in what you're using. And once you have that confidence, I think your result numbers actually improve.
I have to.
Because I
Sorry, I have to show this thing again. On this, this is the image I'll have in my mind all season when I'm hunting. Like, this is what I'll be thinking about. Like, this is the way the rifle shoots. You know, everything else is up to you. Don't even worry about it. And that's very important, right?
Yeah. And once you're confident in something like that, like I said, I think your recovery rates are improving. And as long as you don't let it get too carried away and be so confident you're making bad decisions on, hey, I'm shooting through some cover that's a little bit thicker than I would like, but it is, I'm down to the last day. I need to close the deal. As long as you can kind of keep that under control, and you're out there, your equipment's right, you've had some practice with it, you're confident in what you're shooting, and not just, dust it off, take a shot, and put it back in the cabinet for the season. Prior to hunting, if you're getting out and you're using it, I think that confidence also encourages you to use it more. And so I think that's all a good recipe for a good outcome.
And as we were talking about earlier, a hunter who'll use his rifle for target practice as well, his confidence is going to be massively higher compared to the hunter who has just fired a couple of rounds to zero it in, and then all of a sudden he's out there in the deer woods or on the plains, trying to shoot at something 400 yards away. I mean, that sort of situation is no fun unless you are confident, unless you know where your bullet's going to hit, what your holdover is going to have to be, and those are the things you're going to have to practice. So the hunter who does that, I think, is going to have more success and more fun hunting, right?
Absolutely. And a good portion of what I think you're coming from right there, in my opinion, is that when somebody's out there and they're with a firearm, they run into little things, they run into little snags that, say for instance, one that will just kind of knock you off your game a little bit is, you go to load a rifle and you're sitting in the bench, and you've got a drop box magazine, and now you can't get the magazine out without taking the rifle up, and you're just kind of working through little things like that you may see in the field, that you're kind of getting ahead of that, and you're kind of working on those techniques and fundamentals that are going to flow better when you're out there and you don't have that bench in front of you any longer. And I guess that's another subject that I try and share with people often, is that was one of the things that I was doing a lot of back then, is trying to find new seating positions and things. I'll tell you an eye opener. I used to shoot off the pot, and I show up in South Dakota, and I need to make a 250-yard shot, and I get out there, and the grass is just about mid thigh, and so there's no shooting off of the bipod that I brought. There's, what do I have? I have a fence post, and I have a roll of baling wire over here, and now I've got to go and shoot off of that. And so that I know 250-yard shot doesn't sound like a long way, but you want to make it as ethical as possible. And now you've got to run over that baling wire, that barbed wire on a roll, it's on a barrel, and you get there and you're breathing a little heavy, and they've seen you out there in the wide open in the broad daylight, run across there. So now they're kind of got their withers up, and now you're just kind of waiting for that rifle to go off. And when you can kind of practice those things and get into those positions, shoot off of sticks, shoot off of, just if you're out at the range, try and, grab a pole and shoot, all braced off the pole, and kind of get up and off of that bench and get confident in that, and see what actually helps you maintain, shoot free-handed, things of that nature that will improve your results, because you may not have anything out there that that you can brace on. That shot needs to be taken, and you just don't have the ability to get in a better setup.
And also know your limitations. Because, I mean, if you're in a situation where a freehand shot is your only option, I mean, a good hunter who has practiced these things, he will know what's my maximum range in the freehand position, right? What's my maximum range at a with a pole, with sticks, with and that I think is very important to keep in mind, because I mean, if you're shooting beyond your ability at game, you have the potential for some bad outcomes, yeah. So, but a hunter who's practiced these things, he should know a lot more about his abilities and limitations.
To really caveat on what you're saying right there, is something that just recently happened to me, is shooting off of sticks. Kind of my maximum range is 275, 300 off of sticks with a good caliber.
Yeah, it's really good.
And I had a doe at 107. I mean, we ranged it 178 yards, and that should have been a chip shot for me. But I couldn't get settled down on this animal for some reason. I couldn't get comfortable on the sticks. I couldn't get comfortable behind the rifle. And I just told my buddy that was standing there, I said, hey, if you feel comfortable taking that shot, please take it, because I can't seem to settle in. And I passed on that shot, and I felt like if I tried taking that shot, I would have had a bad outcome. And he was able to close the deal, and we moved on. But I think that's the big thing. It's what you can do today doesn't always mean that you're going to be able to do in that same situation. And sometimes you just can't get it quite sorted out in the time frame that you have. And I think making that decision was the best thing I could have done in that situation.
Yeah, because a bad shot has so kind of have all sorts of complicated follow-ups, and instead of sealing the deal quickly at last light, as you were saying earlier, you can spend half the night running through that forest looking for an animal, and that's not a good situation to be in.
So I think that's a big thing out there, and sometimes you'll run up against those limitations, and it's run up against them in practice and in scenarios than it is when you're out in the field and find out that you're trying to push through it, because it's only 100. It's just repeating in your head. It's only 178 yards. That's
Yeah.
Like it would be a fairly simple thing to do, but you're just struggling with it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not comfortable, don't take the shot. That's my advice. And but you can get, so the solution to that, as we were talking about, is to get more comfortable and more confident. And certainly superior ammunition, excuse the pun, is a component of that, which I think brings us nicely back to why somebody would want to approach a company like yours and really get to know what their rifle and themselves can do, right?
That's right. Yes. We want to put together a package early on to these customers that they can get out on the bench and prove it that it is a good combination. But I highly encourage customers all the time. Once you've got that bond between you and the rifle, that that the shots can be made and it's going to perform to its potential, and that you can do it, try and get up off that bench and get on a set of sticks and get on, shoot from different situations, and especially if you're planning to go out west. For someone like me, I was in Alaska, South Carolina, going out to South Dakota, and the terrain is just completely different. Finding some seating situations. There's plenty of stuff on Google that you can kind of search, figure out how to shoot off of a backpack. I think that's super important.
I want to tell you a funny story about the backpack and shooting. So I went to Austria last year to hunt chamois, this small mountain goat who live at the very top of the mountain, so you have to hike pretty much all the way up to the ridge, and then you're going to be shooting at 150, 200, 250 meters. You're not going to get any closer to these animals. And for this hunt, I had purposefully bought a very nice set of shooting sticks, which is this model that it has two, and it looks kind of like that, right? So you're resting the rifle in the rear and in the front, and it's a rock steady shooting stick. I can make shots at 300 yards with that stick without any problems. But the first thing my hunting guide in Austria said to me, he said, "That shooting stick is useless. Leave it in the car." And I was like, "What do you mean? It's the best shooting stick in the world." He's like, "Trust me, it's just gonna be in the way. Don't even bring it." So of course I bring it, and I lug it all the way up the mountain. It's in the way, and it's getting caught in things, and it's not a good walking stick, and it's just I'm struggling with this shooting stick. So I keep thinking like, okay, when the moment comes, this shooting stick is gonna redeem itself. But then of course when we're shooting at the chamois at 215 meters, we're using the guide's backpack, because he lays the backpack down and he puts the rifle up, and he's like, okay, this is perfect. And of course, that's the setup that ended up working, and I ended up never using the shooting stick at all. It was just in the way the whole hunt.
And something that's pretty important to share with that is that rifles on the bench tend to track well when you've got a nice rest and things of that nature. When you're out there, you're hunting, and you've got your rifle sling and things like that, maybe even a bipod, Picatinny rail, things of that nature. Whether you're on a backpack or in a box blind or whatever you may be resting that rifle on, those things can actually, during recoil, affect the way that rifle tracks, and the way that rifle tracks actually affects the point of impact. So when you're actually out there and you're shooting off of a backpack and things, and say that you have an empty Picatinny rail that's underneath the front, and it hangs in that backpack, and your shot is, thrown a few inches maybe by where your target may be, sorting that out on a practice session is much better than trying to figure out, boy, everything just seemed to go right. Why did I miss that animal? But on a target, I think it will actually show itself much faster than in the field, where you just kind of come out of there, because you got to walk out of there. And a lot of these hunts, you're not by yourself, so somebody's to run you down on you making a bad shot for sometimes even a few days. And that can be an awful long walk back to camp.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've seen that happen. The guy who misses his shot in the before lunch, he's not a happy customer all afternoon. So yeah, I've seen that happen.
And so you end up can be awful tough on you, especially if you've come out there and you've bragged a little bit on how well you shoot and things of that nature, and you make a bad shot. They're going to remind you of all those nice comments that you had prior to your shot.
Absolutely. My personal rule is that I don't say anything about my shooting abilities until after I shot something. If I make the shot, I'll be like, yeah, I'm a good shot. Yeah, don't worry about it. But before I've shot anything, I don't say anything.
That's right. Yeah. And so, getting that information, getting out there, using it, getting comfortable, generally is going to improve overall your end result.
Yeah, and I think what we're telling people here ultimately is that you can't practice too much. You can't put too much thought into your, the choice of rifle, load, bullet, things like that. You really can't overemphasize how much how important these things are, because ultimately it all comes down to that one moment, right? You might you know and I think about it like this: like you might sit at the bench and you might shoot well 9 out of 10 shots, or 8 out of 10 shots, and generally things are going really well. But when you're out on that hunt and you have that one opportunity, that one shot, you need to make sure, you need to be sure that you can make it. Like, you don't want that shot to be the ninth shot you miss, right?
Yes. And one other thing I'd like to share overall is a hunting rifle versus a target rifle versus they're just made differently. Every one of them, is somewhat different, and there's not one single way to shoot every rifle the same. And an individual could come out there and they can take a 16 or 20-pound rifle, and it's on the bench, and they don't even need to have cheek weld. They're not touching the rifle other than the trigger. They're just watching the condition on the target, making sure that the wind's right, and they take the shot. Well, once you've come up off of that bench, and you're now, you're hunting with a hunting weight rifle. Most of the rifles that I see today generally kind of finish out depending on what customers are putting on it for optics and things of that nature, which can really change overall of what what their rifle package combo is, and how you'd want to shoot that. You wouldn't take a very lightweight rifle and say that you don't put any influence on it, because you don't know how that's up off of the rest, whether that rest is a set of sticks, or if it's a backpack, or if it's shooting it freehand. Sometimes on a lightweight rifle, you need to imply some influence to that rifle and kind of, and be consistent with it. And so kind of taking a lightweight rifle that you pulled off the bench, and you kind of got groups, and you're constantly, getting good groups with it off the bench, and you take it out to a backpack or set of sticks, or what have prone position, or once you start making some of those changes, you need to find out how that rifle wants to be shot, because all of them are the same. And so when you're in some, I guess I'll just use the Marine Corps here, they kind of train the same way every time, and that's fine because they plan to use the same firearm for long range, shooting, and in a lot of their situations. And so they've kind of figured out what works for that. But you take that same individual that's been taught for years to shoot a fairly heavy 308, and you put them on either a custom rifle that starts out at 4.5 to 5.5 pounds, and it's got a fairly lightweight scope, and they don't want to put a brake on it and things of that nature. That rifle's not going to shoot. You wouldn't shoot that rifle the same as you'd shoot that sniper rifle. And you got to figure out how that rifle needs to be shot to shoot well.
Yeah.
And so I think those are some of the key elements on practice and what that can do to improve, your outcome and making good shots in the field.
Absolutely, that's very good advice, Lonnie. Yeah, I agree with you, and I've seen this thing in the past as well. Some rifles, they if you hold them in a certain way, or for some reason, the setup is different. Certainly the rifle can shoot differently, so it's very important that you find that out before the hunt, as we were saying. So
yes,
yeah.
To caveat off of that real quick is that some of these rifles that are made lightweight have really good stocks on them, but you're taking some material and things out. They've got, they have plenty of free float to the barrel and things, but you can take that same rifle from more of a production, and you bought it at a lot less money. The stocks are a little more flimsy. They're free float. Maybe they're not centered in the barrel. If you're putting a little bit of, left to right into that stock, it may contact that barrel under recoil and things. And now it's actually throwing your shot. And you don't really see that because you haven't seen that or haven't tried to create that in the field, in a field type situation.
Yeah, and another thing that could impact, especially if you're practicing, is heat. So especially if you have a very lightweight rifle, you're going to have a lightweight, thin barrel, and those, they'll start shifting the point of impact after only a couple of shots, right?
Especially if it's not a well-bedded rifle. Yes, and you can start to induce something that's not the same, whether it's heat or influence on how much tension you're putting on the rifle. Very little tension versus, hey, just about to squeeze this thing into two. Those can have different effects on how it shoots.
Yeah. Now this is very, very interesting to talk about these things with you, because everything that you're mentioning now is things I think that all hunters need to spend some time thinking about. And as you said, sometimes you make a shot and you don't know why didn't it go. And I think to have that analytical mindset to go back and think, okay, so why, obviously the shot didn't go as planned, like that's a fact, but why? You work backwards, and I think that's very important for hunters who are serious about their hunting and their outcomes to get into that mindset and think in that way.
Yeah, many times I've seen individuals, customers, friends, different people that have made a shot in the field, and this is something that I do, and I would suggest that they do, but they'll go back and say, hey, let's go check zero on your rifle, and put it back on the bench, and now it's shooting right back to where it was supposed to. What you may go back and try to recreate that situation that you're in. You're shooting it off of a bag, you were doing this, that, or the other, because your situation is different, and you may see that in certain situations, it changes your point of impact depending on your equipment and what you're doing.
Yeah. So this is it's very good to do this for all hunters. Yeah, we could all benefit from doing more of this and thinking more like this. I wanted to before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you a few quick questions.
Sure.
So let's see. The age-old question: do you prefer a lighter or a heavier bullet?
Here's one of the things, and I've mentioned this a couple of times throughout this podcast: application. I think application is key, and that application meaning that if I'm shooting a lighter bullet, I want that bullet to be of well construction, depending on what I'm using it for. What I'm going to shoot, groundhogs with, I'm looking for a lighter bullet, something that's going to be upset much easier, that sort of thing. So I'm looking for light, high velocity. I'm not opposed as I was growing up, kind of caveat, going back to what we were talking about earlier, how we were raised, when we were growing up, and the technology of the day, for the most part, was cup and core style bullets. And one of the things, there were rule of thumbs and things like that people had created and kind of set some thresholds for in certain applications. And there's a lot of truth to that. Even today, if you went back and you use that, but some people are actually still bringing along some of that. They're hanging on to that. And it's not bad as long as they're applying it to what it was designed for, cup and core type bullets and things. But as we go into these monolithic bullets, bullets that are bonded, that are going to hold together, retain their weight well. You're actually doing yourself somewhat an injustice if you don't calculate what you're using it for,
Mm-hmm.
such as if if you're not shooting into dense critters and things of that nature. On a buffalo, you want to try and on any animal, but you're trying to balance your bullet weight versus the media that you're shooting into with the caliber you're using and the uh, you're just taking that situation. So something that's going to work well, a bullet that's going to penetrate well doesn't do any good if you create 5,000 foot-pounds of energy and you dump 3,800 of it into the dirt behind the animal. It's just not effective. So, and you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the early on for me is I shot a whitetail with a 12 gauge with a 1 ounce slug, and that whitetail just it didn't have any impact to it. And I thought that it was going to be like what we've seen on TV, where that 1 ounce slug hit this critter because it's 3/4 of an inch in diameter, and it was going to put this critter 10 or 15 feet into the air, and I'm being, but
Doesn't work like
that
that in the real world. It just doesn't.
that animal did not even fit
Yeah.
because it thin skin. I shot it behind the shoulder. That buck was probably 160 pounds and broadside shot through the rib cage. If you're looking down on that animal as it was standing, that animal was probably 10, 12 inches at most. So that bullet, from the time it impacted that animal, had that much time to figure out what it was going to do to come to its full potential. And so that's where bullets come in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're trying to do. You've got to see what your intended purpose is for that bullet,
Mm-hmm.
and understand its construction, what velocities you're going to be shooting it at, what you're going to be shooting it into, and what type of shooter are you. Because an animal could have, what you're shooting it into can be different. If you're shooting behind the shoulder versus you're shooting into the shoulder, can transition very quickly, on what type of construction you would need. So we've had rule of thumbs out there for a long time for sectional density of a bullet to be used on this, and there's lots of truths out there that people share. But if you kind of pick that apart, it can turn into a bad situation. If you're not taking it in its whole sum of what that individual is telling you, that really knows what's going on with bullet construction, distance, that has done a lot of it. If you're just kind of picking what humans tend to ask questions that they want an outcome in their mind. And so it's one of those things, kind of pay attention to your overall application. And so asking that question right there, which that is, that in certain situations, I would lean to a lighter weight bullet and then of a certain construction. And if you were going to ask me if I'm going to shoot a cup and core, and even if I'm going to shoot it on, say, a mule deer, I'm going to try and go a little heavier for caliber, because caliber diameter, it really has a big piece of it. If you're going to shoot, what I'm shooting an antelope with in a particular caliber, cartridge caliber, would be a little bit different than what I'd want to use on shooting elk into the front shoulder. I may tweak what may be more ideal. Now, understanding bullet construction and things of that nature, I feel like I can take a lightweight bullet in certain applications and still be very effective and successful on shooting elk with that bullet. But I also need to kind of, look at and understand and be cognizant of what I'm using and how to use it.
Yeah, and this is an excellent point you're raising, because as you're saying, if you know the limitations of your bullet, you can use it to take any game, right? But if you don't know the limitations of your bullet, you might again end up using it incorrectly, and that's not going to work. So for example, if you're using as I think you were alluding to, a lighter hyper-fragmenting bullet, you can certainly use that bullet to take an elk, but not if you shoot it straight up on the shoulder, or in another place where those fragments aren't really going to be able to get in there and reach the vitals. You're not going to be successful. But if you're able to, for example, slip it in there and with a well-placed shot, you could absolutely be successful, right?
That's correct. Yeah. Yes. And then you could go so heavy that your impact velocities are very low, and you've got a well-constructed bullet that if you're shooting that on thin-skinned critters, that bullet has passed through that animal through the penetration process, and it never to its full potential. So you're not creating the trauma necessary to shut that animal down in a quick fashion, in an ethical fashion. And so
I hear this is the sort of stories you hear from hunters. They say, I have this bullet, it's fantastic, it's worked really well, except last time I used it didn't work at all. It just went straight through the deer, and the deer ran off, and I don't know what happened. And in those instances, it's as you're saying, if you have a bullet that's if you're pushing it at if you're not pushing it, if it's a hard bullet and you're not pushing it fast enough, or for some reason you're not hitting something hard enough with your shot placement, it might be then that the bullet goes straight on through, and all of a sudden you're going to have the same effect as if you're using a solid, right? So it's all about knowing where that bullet that you're using, what speed it's at, and where it needs to go, right?
Exactly. And so here in South Carolina, for example, I get phone calls quite often saying that I've been shooting a forelock my whole life and I want to shoot something better. And I ask those individuals, what are you doing with it? And they're like, well, what are you typically shooting with it? And they're talking about shooting 80 pound to 120 pound, 150 pound max bucks and 80 pound does. And there's two pieces of this. They've had good results off of a core lock or something like that that's been nice and soft and expands easy, and that's what you want on a really thin-skinned animal that you're shooting behind the shoulder. Because if you took a bullet that didn't do that, and it was really well constructed and was designed from the ground up to have controlled expansion, meaning that you want it to expand at a rate that is commensurate to what you're using it on, like your SSs and even the monolithic CXs. Understanding that and working that bullet a little harder as you become more premium. Doesn't matter really what you spend the money on. That's your SS there, and that's what you would anticipate.
Yeah.
And for certain, if you weighed that bullet and you're right, you're probably somewhere along the lines of 80+% weight retention. And so you have very little fragmentation there. And so one of the things that works with your bullet is how flat that meat plat is and how far that's going to stretch the tissue around it.
Yeah. And this is actually this is an interesting thing I learned about solid bullets, that you might think that this bullet is going to whistle right on through and just it's not going to do anything apart from where it goes. But actually what ends up happening is that air gets trapped by the knee plat, right? As it enters the target, the air gets trapped by the knee plat, and then that creates this sort of like explosive effect, even though you're using a solid.
So here's my interpretation of what you're saying there. I think what you're saying is correct, but here's my interpretation. There's not air trapped in front of that meat plat. You have such a large surface that as that bullet is traveling at a high rate of tissue, that it's pushing that tissue out and away from the front of it. And it doesn't allow that it's dragging air with it because there's a cavity that comes behind that.
Mm-hmm.
And until that bullet, anything coming out is going to come out of the hole that it went in. If you can get that on high rate of speed video, you'll see that you've got things that are puking out of the hole that it came in because it's creating all that expansion in that one area. And so until it pops a hole to create a vacuum out of the other side, it's going to come out of the side that it went into. So if you've ever went up to an animal and you've seen that there's a lot of catastrophic material out in front of it, and you're like, well, that doesn't make sense because the exit was here. Well, the exit was only there and once that bullet exited, but there was a lot of work being done prior to that bullet making it through the far side because it's not forcing anything out of the far side yet until it actually penetrates that. And then it actually creates a vacuum and sucks air with it as that bullet exits. And so that fat me-plat, what is great about a fat me-plat like that, what you have there, that's a 68% me-plat. And so that some of the people understand what that means is if you take and measure the overall bullet diameter, that me-plat is approximately 68% of the diameter.
Yeah.
So it's hard to tell in video, but I'm assuming that's somewhere between the 375 and 416 diameter. And so if you measure the outside caliber.
Yeah, let me get the calipers. We'll see what the... Yeah, this is... what did you say?
And so that 68% me-plat is basically pulled from that that measurement. See that there is actually on the sides of that. The only reason that that's not 80% is because 80 won't feed through a lot of rifles.
That's a 4.
I can't quite.
It's a 416. So yeah.
Okay. Yes. And so if you took and you multiplied 416 times 0.68, that would be the surface area of that front of that bullet, approximately.
Let's see. I think you are absolutely correct. Let's see. 416 times 0.68. Yeah, 282. And if I measure the me-plat, yeah, it's spot on.
So a bullet even better is a bullet that is larger than 68%. But in that 416, you don't know that that bullet is going to go in a 500 416, a 416 Ruger, Rigby, and so at that point, you need to be able to have that bullet feed reliably, especially on a solid.
Yeah.
And that was the largest me-plat you could go with to build that bullet and reliable feeding. And you can see that that's not always the way that bullet design was designed. And so that if you look at a lot of the different bullet manufacturers, CEB, Norfolk, a lot of them kind of had that same design. And if you look at some of their part numbers, it is engineered in there that you will see a B13 in a lot of it. And Mr. Mike McCurry that helps design a lot of these, it was kind of deemed the bastard number 13 because he thinks the bastard still may be going because of all the penetration that it had. And that 13 prototype of different bullets that performed best during his testing. And so as you see, if you're pulling some of those, some of the part numbers and things of that nature, you'll see integrated into those B13.
Okay.
And that's that is originated from.
I'll look out for that.
Yeah.
But this is a fascinating, and I think the way you're describing what's happening with a bullet as it enters a target, and you get this tissue is being displaced, and then what actually follows the bullet is a vacuum, right? Because when you displace tissue very quickly, you end up creating a vacuum, right, where there's nothing in it, and obviously air is going to want to fill it. So you end up getting this vacuum effect out the front, which I don't think a lot of hunters actually think, or yeah, certainly not all hunters have thought about that. That's actually what's happening, and, you know, as the bullet makes its way through the game. That's really fascinating.
Yes. And so the larger the me plat, as long as the bullet has a substantial mass and velocity to carry that, it can. I look at a lot of things from the perspective that are tangible to me, and kind of to share with you what we're talking about here is if you take a pickup truck that has a 13-inch wide tire on it, and you're going through a parking lot, and there's a puddle of water there, and you go through it at 35 miles per hour, and you take a cyclist that's on a 10-speed style thinner tire, the thinner and they go the same speed, that thin tire basically just makes a ripple through the water and it closes right back. So a wound channel does a lot the same thing. So take that mud tire and you pass through that same mud puddle in that same parking lot at the same velocity, and now your water is out into the ditches and everything else, and it's to the point that it can't recover. It won't just reheal itself, and a bullet does a lot the same thing. And so when you have that me plat on there, even though it's a couple of things that work against you, as that me plat is traveling through the air, it's less efficient, and that's where your BCs are going to come in. But during realistic, for the most part, way most hunters, the majority of the hunters hunt, and for what you're using a solid for, it's often 25 to 50 yards. Everything's kind of a give and a take, and that bullet is not exposed to the time of flight is so short that it doesn't have such a huge impact on it, that you're creating a bullet that you're trading off that BC to how it's going to perform on that animal at those shorter distances. And so
BC for a solid like this is a 416 solid. It's going to be used to shoot elephant, buffalo, things like that. BC is completely irrelevant because at your shooting distances, and as you're saying, what you want as large a frontal surface as possible to create as much of a wound channel and shock effect as possible. Because when you're shooting at a buffalo, right, with one of these, he might even be charging you at something like 20-30 meters. So yeah, that's the situation you're going to be using that in.
But be careful with that comment though, because you said the larger the better. Well, there again, everything sort of a trade-off.
Yeah.
So when you've got a 577 nitro and you're staring down on an elephant, for sure, all that your displacement is so large that a lot of people don't calculate that. And so by the difference of shooting an elephant at 1950 versus 1850 can make the difference. So you can't reach that switch, and that's what you're looking for. And an elephant is kind of one of those things that you can dump a lot of energy on them because they do that amongst themselves as they fight. The energy that they exert against one another, it far exceeds anything that rifle is capable of doing, if you were to calculate that from a formula perspective.
Oh yeah, concussive. The concussive force that's required to knock an animal out through pure concussion, that is beyond what rifles can produce, right? That's certainly my understanding as well.
So Mr. Bell had a good example when he went and he was shooting elephants and things of that nature with his 7x57, that it really is most important to make contact with that switch to disconnect that central nervous system. And so that's one of the things too that goes with that application and trying to find a situation and understanding of what you've got to do. And you're right, a lot of people will. So let's take what I was saying earlier, where you've got that big fat meat plat on the front that's really plowing and creating a lot of trauma outside of its point of contact. Because now, as it's passing through, it's creating such an effect that it's pulling apart those nerve endings and veins and things of that nature that help support the function of that animal.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can pull them to the point that they break, they can't recover.
Mm-hmm.
But you can to the point that if you don't stretch it far enough, that it's still usable. And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to offset that animal enough early on that they can't recover, and it's quickly dispatched. And so, but you've also got to find the balance. If you shoot a bullet that is too small, that doesn't have the displacement or create the trauma, that it could pass right beside a major artery and do zero damage to it. Put a meat plat on the front of that, or if that bullet had expanded, just the expansion alone, even though that bullet diameter of 7 millimeter, using a 7 millimeter, didn't expand to the point that it did the damage, its ability with that larger meat plat to push that stuff apart created the trauma and the wound channel necessary to create a good blood trail and make that blood trail significantly shorter by the trauma that it incurred. If you go too short, you come up short on penetration, you don't get to the vitals. If you go too far, you're dumping all that energy into the animal on the other side, or the dirt or tree or stump or whatever's beyond that animal, another animal. And so you're not seeing the effects that round has potentially built into it.
Yes. Yeah, it's about finding the right balance, as you're saying. And what I meant earlier was, I didn't mean larger is always better, because certainly you come to a certain point, and I think you said, 577 or something like that. I think when you get up to those calibers, you're sort of reaching the limits for what's possible to build a rifle that's carryable, and also what's possible for a human to endure in terms of recoil, right? So when you start getting above the 500 calibers, really you might be pushing it a bit too far, but when you're shooting at large and dangerous game, for example, certainly there is a clear relationship, or on all game, but it becomes much more relevant when you're hunting large and dangerous game, and you end up in these situations where you need the bullet to have an effect immediately. Larger will be generally more effective, and smaller will be generally less effective, right? Even though they might both be effective, or they might both be ineffective in certain situations. There is certainly a relationship between size and sort of impact.
I think the quick and accurate answer to that question goes back to application. What you're shooting it into. And you've got to take a lot of variables and put them together to improve that outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have just two more questions, and these are going to be really quick. And then let's see. What's your favorite, or some of your favorite cartridges to load for?
Well, boy, I've got a lot of them.
I was afraid of that.
And their application, I will say this, that as far as cartridges and things, I tend to be a minimalist when it comes to things like that. Where if you took a poll of a lot of people that were shooting, say for instance, brown bears, they're generally shooting larger than I would. And when I showed up out there, and I generally like to default to something that is a bit bigger, but I feel like if you know what you're shooting, we're shooting high-powered rifles with good components, and so you can do a lot with a high-powered rifle, and that goes from, surprisingly enough, when I was in Alaska, some of the guys up there, the natives were shooting, 223s and things of that nature, and that was just really threw me for a loop. They're shooting whales and walrus with 223s, and I was just taken back that, boy. But then when you start to look at it, and it's all about, it's a high-powered rifle to get the job done. If you know what if you pick the proper bullet for the application, and their application is they needed something that they could, get in high volume. It was like the that they could use, and 223 will penetrate very well with a full metal jacket on certain critters like that. And all you're doing is reaching in there and touching that switch, and once you do that, it's pretty quick. And honestly, sometimes a caliber like that may work even better than something that is larger, that displaces more, that doesn't make it to that point of interest. Central nervous system, brain, spinal cord, that sort of thing.
That's the Karamojo Bell effect, right? Because he was using 757 Mauser, and I think he was also using a 6.5 Mannlicher or something like that, or a 303. And he would be shooting military ammunition, right? Which at that time was, round-nosed, old school military style bullets. But still, he wouldn't be killing the elephants by, displacing tissue and creating bleeding. He would be killing the elephants by, reaching in there and just about touching the switch. And that's, as long as you do that, it's over.
That's right. That's going to, that's really where it comes down to, is it enough? You can get it to that point, you can better your odds, because if he took that 7x57, he'd probably end up shooting, a very large quantity of ammo into that animal if he wasn't shooting it into the brain. If he was shooting anywhere else.
Yeah, that wouldn't be ethical, and it probably would be very dangerous to do that sort of thing.
Yeah,
but I think Karamojo Bell, I want to remember that he carried around like a much bigger caliber rifle as well as a backup, right? Because you're not going to be shooting a charging buffalo with a 757. You're going to need. So I want to remember that he had a backup rifle of a much larger caliber as well, but I might be wrong on that.
That's smart, but he could shoot a buffalo with a 7x57 if it's a brain shot, and do pretty well. But at the same point, that when things get out of control, it's best to default back to something that is going to create a lot of trauma, bring a lot of foot-pounds of energy, and improve your odds of getting a hold of the central nervous system, whether it's the spine or the brain. You shoot through as much of the animal as you can in hopes. If that bullet comes up short, 2 or 3 inches on penetration, your odds of actually contacting the central nervous system and shutting this switch off is a lot less likely not to happen in 2 penetration. If you've got 6 and 8 foot of penetration, if you're shooting through an animal on target, that your chance of contacting that switch is much improved.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the trauma that it creates during the path is typically going to improve the odds that animal is going to be shut down.
Yeah,
much quicker.
But if you could pick one cartridge, like you're only allowed to load for one cartridge, which one would it be?
For everything, 375, hands down. 375. You can do an awful lot with a 375. I mean, we send more ammo to Africa to hunt elephant and buffalo every year with 375s.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic brown bear cartridge. Given the right bullet, your 250 grain, SS is absolutely fantastic. Any and honestly, on things such as brown bear, going a little bit softer and getting more expansion
Mm.
is going to be, but still have the ability that it's going to hold together and break bone. Yeah.
This is the buffalo combination, or you have the solid and the soft. Um, I think 375. I think if you ask this question to guys who go to Africa and you ask African hunters, the 375 H&H is by far the most popular all around caliber. You can use it with a lighter bullet, like a 230 grain bullet or something like that, and do really well on longer shots. But you can also load it up with 350 grain solids and do really well on buffalo or elephant. So it seems to be that sweetheart cartridge. It's just large enough for just about anything, but you can also go just about small enough for for most things.
Yes. And I think if things were getting tough and powder was hard to find, and you just needed one cartridge that's going to do everything
Mm.
to get you by, it was sure. You know this more than anyone. 9.3 by 62 has been doing it for a very long time in those situations. The 375 just has more bullet options and things of that
Mm.
nature here in the United States. Um, Most of the Europeans that I talk to here and that are going to travel abroad, they do really have a high regard to the 9.3 by 62, and we do also. But you know, I just look at it from a standpoint: the rifle availability,
Mm.
bullet options. I mean, in a 375 here in the United States right now, you can shoot a bullet weight of 160 right on up to 400 weight, as long as your twist rate will support it.
Oh yeah.
There'll be some things out there that one will maybe more ideal than another, but if that's the only ad, you could pick a twist rate that would be tight enough and shoot a 350 grain bullet and down to some of the lighter weight and really have it covered.
I can tell you that over here in Sweden, the 9.3 by 62 is far more popular than the 375. And it's a very venerated caliber. It's one of the top 5 calibers for sure, that's used by Swedish hunters. And for the same reasons, you can load it up with lighter bullets and hunt a roe deer. No problem. You can hunt a fox with it if you use a sort of softer expanding bullet, but you can also load it up with heavier bullets, and then you can be hunting bears or the largest of moose, and everything just falls within the territory of the 9362. So yeah, it's very popular over here.
Yes, yeah, I would agree with that. Um, so I'm talking to you right now on my iPhone,
Mm,
and I am battery power fairly
yeah,
quickly. I'm down to less than 10%. So I'll probably have to wrap it up here because I
yeah,
don't have a charger with me.
yeah.
But I don't want it just to die on us. But I'd love to pick up another conversation in the future and things. As you can tell, I really enjoy talking about this stuff. I like sharing this stuff with customers. I think it's really important that that you know if you've got this kind of information that will help others, you might as well share it. And so,
Absolutely. That's I agree with you 100%. The more good information we can get out there to hunters, the more good hunts we'll have, and the better it'll be for the hunting community overall. So I would love to pick up this conversation with you again, Lonnie. I want to thank you so much for coming on today and talking with us at such great length and in such great detail. And let's schedule something in and try to do it again. I'll tell you what. I actually have a 9.3 by 62 on the way in. I'm being gifted an old Husqvarna 9.362 by a friend. So hopefully, by the next time we talk, we can have a look at that, and maybe talk some loads and bullets for that as well.
absolutely. And I have a few 375s here in the shop. It's pretty common here to have 375 H&Hs in the shop, and and setting them up for customers and things of that nature. So be glad to do it. Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And thanks everybody for listening. This has been the North Fork podcast with me, Eric, and Mr. Lonnie Cribb from Superior Ammunition in South Carolina. If you have any questions about loads, ballistics, rifles, or want to get the absolutely most possible out of your rifle, don't hesitate to contact Lonnie. He will absolutely be able to help you out and get you set up with the ideal combination for what you're using and what you're hunting with. So until next time, thank you everybody for tuning in and listening.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate you having me. Take care.
Bye, Lonnie.
North Fork Podcast.